I've been running a motorcycle channel here on YouTube for just over 3 years now, and it's doing quite well. Now, I've sort of hit my stride with this channel, which has left me with a little bit of spare time, so I thought I would try my hand at something different, a different channel on a different subject. As well as a passion for motorcycles, I've also always had a passion for aquariums. It started when I was about 8 years old, keeping sticklebacks from one of the local dikes in a tank in my bedroom. As with most hobbies, it didn't stand still. I progressed from there. And one of the first things that I did when I started to work and had some disposable cash was set myself up with a marine aquarium. Now, back in those days, keeping marine fish was considered virtually impossible. We were still reliant on undergravel filters for filtration. Even in the early 1980s, the requirements of marine fish still wasn't fully understood. And the salt mixes required for mixing up the seawater to keep them in, although it was marketed as being indistinguishable from real salt water, in later years turned out to be wholly inadequate. In fact, in some cases we discovered it was actually the salt mixes that were killing the fish. Now, add to this questionable collection methods of the actual fish themselves. Then nearly all marine specimens were wild caught, and quite often questionable methods were used to collect them. Using dynamite to stun the fish, and then later on using cyanide to render them unconscious so they were easy to catch, were methods that were regularly used. Sickening practices that we, the hobbyists, were unaware of. The result being that most of the fish we bought were already dying when we bought them. It was an uphill struggle for us hobbyists. The requirements of live corals were also little understood. No one really had a clue what was required to keep them alive, let alone propagate them. So understandably, reef keeping, or the keeping of marine fish, was something that was considered very, very difficult to achieve. Most books on the subject were inadequate and woefully out of date, and this was a situation that continued well into the late 1990s. Now, if the scientific community is honest, it didn't really have much to do with the advances of marine aquaculture. The techniques and methods used to successfully keep reef creatures alive today were pioneered by people like me, by hobbyists, with that information passed on to the industry that in turn responded by creating products that actually worked. For the most part, anyway. Successful reef keeping really took off at the beginning of this century, in the early 2000s. And since then, it has come on in leaps and bounds. As a hobbyist myself, I feel we've never had it so good. And reef keeping is now easier than it has ever been. Over the last 20 years, I have been involved with the industry on and off, but I still find it a distasteful industry. And to that end, I prefer to remain as a hobbyist. If you like, a practical, conscientious aquarist. The worldwide industry, on the whole, has done a lot of damage to itself over the last 4 decades. So to my mind, it is now more important than ever that we approach reef keeping with a more sustainable attitude. Now, in the past, I have had the big 200-gallon aquariums. And as impressive as those type of aquariums are, they're also very resource hungry. So about 20 years ago, I turned my attention to nano reefs. Now, technically, a nano reef is a reef aquarium of a volume of less than 15 gallons. Although technically, once you get to a reef aquarium of less than 5 gallons, it becomes a pico reef. 20 years ago, aquariums of this size were frowned upon. They were considered cruel, if you like, and unsustainable. An attitude that, to my mind, was born from ignorance. Because providing you rigidly follow a few rules, and put a bit of time in without fail every week, these little micro reefs can be sustained successfully for years. The financial outlay on them is not huge. They don't take up an awful lot of space. But more importantly, if stocked where possible with farm cultured or tank bred specimens, they can help take an enormous strain off our natural reefs while still allowing people like us to pursue our hobbies and interests. Now, over the recent Christmas period, my current nano tank of 4 or 5 years sprang a leak, which resulted in an emergency strip down, and I had to get rid of a lot of my livestock. Now, granted, at the time it wasn't a good day for me, it was extremely stressful. But in actual fact, I think this incident has handed me a golden opportunity. An opportunity to start up a new channel and pass on 37 years of marine aquarium keeping knowledge, offering practical advice to people that are looking to get into this hobby, and also to people that have just started up in this hobby and are perhaps having difficulties. Now, I spent a fair bit of the holiday period looking at various YouTube channels on this subject, and there does seem to be an awful lot of them. There are some brilliant channels out there, but there are also some channels at the opposite end of the spectrum that left me wincing a bit. In fact, for the most part, some of those channels seem to be aimed at showcasing the YouTube personality of the channel owner rather than really helping people. You don't need to worry about that with me because I've got the personality of a brick. My aim with this channel is to help people to become successful in this hobby. To show people that it doesn't need to cost the earth in order to reach that success. And I also want to nurture a different attitude towards the livestock that we put in our tanks. A responsible and caring attitude that will hopefully lessen suffering and death for the wonderful and often intelligent creatures in our care. Now, I've already filmed the initial setup of the nano tank that I'm going to use at the beginning of this channel. A Fluval Evo 13.5 aquarium system. I know this tank is a bit of a cliche, it's been overdone on YouTube, it's been done so many times by so many different people. But the fact remains that it is a wonderful little tank which is extremely good value for money, and it's an ideal place for a lot of people to start. Now, as you may have gathered, the setting up of this tank has already been filmed, and it's about 3 weeks into its cycling process. I intend covering every aspect of this setup in minute detail, from the intricacies of the filtration setup, the cycling process, introduction of specimens, and the routine regular maintenance required to keep it in tip-top running condition. Now, obviously, as with any YouTuber, I need to get as many views to this channel as I possibly can if it's going to be successful. So to that end, I will be uploading this both on my motorcycle channel, on which this channel has already been announced, as well as the first dedicated upload to this channel. I sincerely hope that people will recognise and appreciate the value of what I'm trying to do, and that you'll join me on this wonderful journey of breathing life into a new marine environment in your home. I intend uploading once a week. I will try and stick to that if I can, although obviously the other channel is my main priority at the moment. So fingers crossed, I will see you all here next week. I'm not quite sure what date I will be uploading, I've still got to determine how it's going to work, for part 1 of setting up this lovely little nano tank. So in both cases, whether you're watching this video on my motorcycle channel, because I will upload this on my motorcycle channel as a sort of a crossover production, although I will say this will be the last upload of this type on that channel, or whether you're a new visitor to this channel and this has piqued your interest, please subscribe, please leave a like, and if you subscribe, hit the notification button so that you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. And remember, fish are friends, not just food. I'll see you next week.